In this lesson, we're going to take a look at what city life was like in the late 1800s. First thing we need to look at are the technological improvements that were made during the time period. You see in the photo on the left, horse-drawn trolleys. Those were your first method of mass transportation, followed later by the electric streetcar, which you see on the right-hand side once we had the development of electricity at the turn of the century. In 1904, I believe the year is, the New York City subway system started to be constructed, and these are some of the photos that show that. This is inside an early subway car. Actually, three different companies that built the New York City subway system, and you can see here, this is the City Hall subway station, and just the effort that was put in, the manpower that must have been used to put the tiles up and whatnot. We're going to have the development of skyscrapers during this period, which one could really define in the 1880s, 1890s as anything over 6 floors. Six stories were the highest anybody really was willing. The development of the steel I-beam made these structures possible. And you're looking at the Woolworth Building on the left and the Empire State Building, which was not fully constructed until the 1930s, on the right. But there was one key invention we need to talk about that really led to the development of the skyscraper, and that, of course, is the elevator, which was invented by Elijah Otis, who invented the safety elevator which allowed the skyscrapers to be built. It was during the late 1800s that a large middle class began to develop, which now had the time to spend and the money to spend on different things. So we're going to take a look at the mass culture that developed, that catered to middle class and their interest in purchasing things. Take a look at this cigarette ad. Can you imagine the cigarette ad? It would never be published today. We have magazines. This is McCall's magazine that was developed to show, in this case, women what the fashions were that they should be buying. I should go back and just highlight on the top right here is an ad for Listerine for fresh breath, and of course the bottom right is an ad for Coca-Cola. R.H. Macy developed Macy's, and what Macy did that was different at the time was to take a number of different stores and put them under one roof, creating what we're all very familiar with, the modern department store. But really, prior to what Macy did, if you wanted women's clothing, you went to a women's clothing store. If you wanted men's shoes, you went to a shoe store. And you wanted toys, you went to a toy store. What was unique here was that Macy's took all of these different stores and placed them under one roof, creating the department store. We're reaching the point in time in the late 1800s where education, at least grade school education, became compulsory. And as a result, kindergartens were developed and high schools were developed, but you had large numbers of people that were able to read. So printed materials like dime novels on the left and other types of books were published, as well as newspapers, to cater to Americans' appetite for things to do, things to read. There were multiple papers in New York City alone, and circulation was widespread. Many people read the papers. And I'd like to point out what made this culture mass culture was the advertising. Everybody was seeing the same ads, like the Coca-Cola ad or the Lucky Strike ad that we looked at a little bit earlier. And as a result, Americans across the country, because of advertising as well as advances in transportation and communication, were very much alike in their consumption patterns. They were buying the same clothing, drinking the same sodas, and whatnot. And this really led to the creation of mass culture. So we've seen some examples of where the middle class spent some of their money, or I should say how they spent some of their money, let's take a look a little bit at where they spent some of their money in regard to entertainment options. Amusement parks were developed, and here you're looking at the Steeplechase Park in Coney Island, New York, which was developed for people to come out for the day and enjoy themselves on a variety of different rides that you see there. Vaudeville shows were tremendously popular in the early. People would purchase a ticket, and inside they would see a variety of specialty acts. Maybe a singer, followed by a dancer, followed by a comedian. And this would last for a couple of hours. Going to see a play at the theater was another option. Here you can see that plays were often put on in different immigrants' native language so that they could be enjoyed by those that didn't necessarily speak English yet. And last but not least, we can't forget the movies. The Nickelodeon Theater became tremendously popular at the turn of the century. Odeon is a Greek word for theater, and nickel means it cost 5 cents. And people would go in, people at all levels of income would go in and enjoy a series of 15-minute short films inside these theaters. Going to a professional sporting event also became a popular way to pass the time. These photos here, you're looking at bicycle racing. In the middle photo, we're looking inside a velodrome. I actually think we're looking inside the original Madison Square Garden. Either way, bicycle racing was popular to watch at the time. Additionally, you have the creation in the late 1800s of professional baseball and the beginning of stadiums to be built. You have horse racing that came into existence, the sport of kings, and boxing is going to become popular during this period in time. This actually is a picture from the late 1800s showing a boxing match. So let's sum up. Technological improvements in the cities led to some major changes in terms of skyscrapers with the invention of the elevator. Trolleys and subways made it much easier to move around in the city. Advertising led to the development of mass culture. We had the department store that was created, newspapers, dime novels, which you had advertising in so that people all across the country began to purchase the same items. And we have entertainment options that came into existence, which included amusement parks, movies, vaudeville, various sporting events. Middle class folks really thought it was a golden age during the late 1800s and turn of the century.